You can ask for permission for big decisions involving spending of funds, but if it doesn't involve spending funds or modifying protocols, oftentimes just getting involved and spotting an area and helping out is the best way to do it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Republic Podcast. Today, we have a very exciting guest and also founder, Will Papper. He's a co-founder of Syndicate DAO. And today's topic is DAOs, which stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It sounds complicated, but I think it's a very interesting topic. And Will's a guru and a veteran in the industry working with DAOs, forming DAOs, and operating with DAOs at the moment. So really excited to have you on, Will.
Thank you, Kinza. It's absolutely fantastic to be here. Big fan of everything Republic is doing to expand access to investing, and big fan of your longtime support for Syndicate.
Awesome. Yeah, why don't we start with a brief intro about yourself and what Syndicate DAO is?
Absolutely, that sounds great. So I'm Will. I'm a co-founder of Syndicate. I got into the decentralization space in 2013, worked on decentralized technologies, including cryptocurrencies, heard about Ethereum in 2014 during the pre-sale, and started to get involved with that ecosystem then. In 2018, I was working at IDEO, a design consultancy that works with a lot of startups and other innovative businesses, and I was doing R&D there. I met my co-founder, Ian, who was running their crypto venture fund at the time, and we started brainstorming the idea for a syndicate. In 2018, there was not enough in place to be able to make Syndicate happen. So we kept brainstorming it for the next 3 years and then founded Syndicate in January 2021. Syndicate is a tool that allows anyone to set up an investment club on the Ethereum blockchain. So you can invest together with your friends incredibly easily. And one really cool thing about this is that it fully automates the whole investing process. So what would be a part-time job in the Web2 world, in the traditional world of keeping track of, for example, everyone who has wired money to your investment club and reporting out which assets you bought, that would be a very tedious process in the Web2 world and is often not done. But in the Web3 world, using Syndicate, we can fully automate it and take a process that's a part-time job down to just a few minutes.
Wow. That's and you guys have a website and a live product right now that people can use and have used to create these syndicates. Is that correct?
Yes. So anyone can create a syndicate at syndicate.io. It's completely free to do. And we've set up over 2,900 investment clubs to date, which is phenomenal. The investment clubs are a subset of a type of organization called a DAO. As you mentioned, a decentralized autonomous organization. We can talk about what that means and the history of it later on. But essentially, Syndicate set up 2,900 of these DAOs, and there are somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 or so DAOs in existence. So we've set up a pretty large portion of this emerging and very fast-growing industry.
Oh, that's super impressive. Really interesting to see, you and Ian coming from a venture capital background, kind of bringing a service to help people kind of execute and invest together in these form of DAOs. Now since the word DAO is coming up over and over again, maybe it's time to pivot a little bit into letting the audience know about what our understanding of a DAO is. What's the best way to get this educational content started? Should we start with a history or should we start with a definition? How should we start here?
Yeah. I'll start with a definition and an example, and then we can move into history.
Sounds good.
So one version of DAOs that a lot of people use to refer to it, a lot of people explain DAOs as they're a group chat with a bank account, and that captures a good portion of it. It's a very great definition to start out with, and the idea is that anyone can come together online, pool funds together, and then decide on how those funds are used as a group. One example that people listening may have heard of is Constitution DAO. I was on the core team of Constitution DAO, and we, in under a week, raised $40 to $50 million, depending on the current price
Wow.
of Ether, to place a bid on the U.S. Constitution at Sotheby's. We unfortunately did not win the bid to win the Constitution, but even managing to raise the money was a fantastic process. And with Constitution DAO, for example, the entire community, had we won, they would have been governing the Constitution together. So it wouldn't be just one person or a small number of people deciding, for example, which museum the Constitution is displayed in and what placards are beside it and things along those lines. It would be the whole community deciding together and voting together. There's a number of these DAOs in the crypto world. They manage many billions in assets. And these DAOs allow people as communities to decide how funds are used instead of that power being concentrated in the hands of a small number of people.
Understood. Wow. I remember Constitution DAO when it was viral on Twitter. It spread like wildfire. I remember the numbers of donations ramping up so quickly. And I was just when that happened, when that kind of like phenomenon happened, I was curious, and would love to hear more about it from you since you're involved in it. Like, how did something like this come about? Like, what is the origination of something like, I guess, DAOs in general, but in this case, Constitution DAO? Did someone just say like, "Hey, I want to buy a Constitution," and I think a DAO, someone, I guess I'm assuming someone from the crypto industry decided to create a DAO and fundraise from the community. And how does something like this, become organized initially? And how do you rally the community to execute on something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Constitution DAO started from a group chat. So similar to how we talked about DAOs as group chats with a bank account, Constitution DAO actually originated there. The origin was that some people had seen a news article that the Constitution was coming up for sale. It was one of the very few constitutions that was still in private hands. And the idea was, instead of having it be purchased by a wealthy billionaire, instead it should be purchased by the people and stewarded by the people together. So a bunch of people in the crypto space, a handful of people, came up with the idea simultaneously, decided to combine their efforts and start a group chat. And that group chat essentially turned into a coordinating committee, and that coordinating committee turned into a large community on Discord, which allows very large groups to coordinate. And there started to be more and more core team members added. So, for example, I was focused on essentially getting them from, we have a bunch of Ether sitting in a wallet on the Ethereum blockchain, to, we need to have cash in hand at Sotheby's to be able to place the bid. And how do we go from this like virtual currency that we have to cash that Sotheby's will accept, and all of the identity and verification documents that Sotheby's requires. And other people were focused on, for example, building the website or helping with PR or moderating the community. And all of us came together on the fly to make this happen. And one incredible thing about Constitution DAO was the flexibility of it. So it started from group chat. A bunch of people came together and helped make it happen. We used fundraising tools where anyone could contribute funds to help donate to purchase the Constitution. And then we placed the bid. And when we lost the bid, it was also then very easy to return the money. We moved the money back into smart contracts that allowed anyone to receive their funds back automatically. So anyone could take their money out, get their donation back, and then we wound down the DAO itself. So I just want to acknowledge how incredible this is, that in the Web 2 world, setting up and coming up with an idea to buy the Constitution, and then raising $40 to $50 million, and then placing a bid, and then returning all that money, You couldn't do that in a week. That would be
Yeah.
maybe 6 months of planning.
Yeah.
In the Web3 world, we could do that in a week, that entire process, thanks
Mm.
to the automation that blockchains and smart contracts give us. And that is absolutely incredible. Could you have run Constitution DAO on Kickstarter? Probably. Would it have taken 6 months and have much higher fees? Absolutely. In the Web3 world, we could literally go from idea to group chat to $50 million raised in
Mhm.
5 days, which is mind-boggling. And then unwinding it was as simple as setting it was nearly as simple as setting it up. Refunding the money was incredibly easy as well. That kind of speed and scale that you can get in DAOs is something I'm so excited about. Something we think a lot about at Syndicate, and
Mm.
something that would be unheard of in the traditional world.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I mean, that was such an exciting thing going on. I was really bummed out to that the Constitution DAO lost the auction. That to hear that, and there was I think there was a lot of Twitter hate against the other buyer who specifically outbid Constitution DAO to prevent the people, the DAO from having control over it, which is an interesting drama. But I think I would have loved to see what kind of decision making happens post winning the auction, what people decide to do with it, building different incentive models. I'm sure people donated to participate. I think there was some speculation on potential like Constitution DAO token. It was a interest. There's a lot of interesting speculation going on, and I would have loved to see how it turned out. Um, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like your experience at Syndicate DAO was extremely relevant in this DAO formation, because Syndicate DAO kind of comes in uh, where it comes in between Web 2 and Web 3 in a lot of ways, where you connect a crypto world with and a crypto world and crypto finances with the traditional world and traditional finances, because those are all relevant in investing. Um, so yeah, I would love to hear how more about how Syndicate DAO works, and could we have used Syndicate DAO to uh, put put something like Constitution DAO together?
Yeah, so Syndicate allows anyone to set up an investment DAO incredibly easily. So investment DAOs are one type of DAO, and it allows people to essentially pool funds together for the purpose of making investments and ideally making a profit and doing good at the same time. And that focus on investment DAOs is something that we think a lot about, and we make it far easier to start an investment club on Syndicate than it would be to start for example, traditional fund in the Web2 world. Um, with Syndicate, you can really easily set up pool funds, manage your membership, automatically give out profits. But that's just one type of DAO. So the other type of DAO that's very common is community DAOs. These are DAOs that are not formed with the expectation of profit. They are formed instead to contribute to some cause, often as donations. And they don't offer underlying ownership of the assets in a way an investment DAO does. So at Syndicate, because we focus on investment DAOs, we focused on essentially we focus a lot on compliance and legal work, and I personally helped Constitution DAO with a lot of the compliance steps that they needed to take. Community DAOs you see a lot of things that look like crowdfunds and a lot of things in that category. They're also a very, very interesting use case for DAOs, a little different than what we focus on. But groups and using Syndicate have purchased real world assets, invested in startups, things along those lines, which is incredibly exciting to us, whether it's real estate, startups, anything else. Groups have done that on Syndicate. They've done it with a profit orientation for it. Community DAOs are a bit different, where you might be, for example, donating money instead for a cause.
Gotcha. So, and it sounds like these DAOs, you mentioned 2,900 DAOs were formed. Congrats again on that. That's really, really exciting achievement. And I'm sure many more to come. And sounds like you guys provide the infrastructure for people to come together and use the tools to create and operate a DAO. But at the same time, it sounds very, very, it sounds very open ended in terms of how, you know, how some of the community management and communication is operated. You mentioned group chat; they can go in Discord, Telegram, whatever, to mainly communicate. And in terms of community engagement and cooperation, things like that, it's open ended in terms of how they want to execute on this. And I guess you can have an initial group chat, but how the community forms and grows is really unique to each and every DAO.
Exactly. Yeah, there are some groups that might have 3 members and they're on Syndicate and they use iMessage group chats to coordinate. Some groups might have 10, 20 members and they might be using Telegram group chats, for example, which are very common in the cryptocurrency space. Some groups have 99 members and they are using Discord, for example, to coordinate. So Syndicate is very flexible. You can set up using whatever tooling you'd like for things like making investment decisions or voting on investments. And that's one thing that's very interesting about the DAO space, and something that a lot of people tend to miss when they first see it, is that one really, really interesting thing about DAOs is that all the DAO tools are compatible with each other, which is really incredible, because that means that any new DAO tool that's built, whether it's, for example, Syndicate for investment DAOs or Guild for token gating, or Snapshot for voting, or Gnosis Safe for wallets, all of that can be combined together, and all of these tools are compatible with each other. And that's something that's really amazing about the space, is that every single startup building a DAO tool is compatible with every single DAO and helps make it better. In the Web 2 world, all of these tools would be their own islands. They'd be completely siloed. Making them interoperate would require pretty extensive work to couple them together. In the Web3 world, with DAOs, these tools are compatible by default. And that means that the entire industry grows and develops. And we can talk a little bit more about the history of DAOs if you'd like. Like DAOs, the very first DAO was created in 2016. Now in 2022, DAOs are managing billions. And this is something that's truly incredible because the space has grown so quickly in barely over half a decade. And we're at the very, very early stages of an incredible innovation. An innovation that I believe is as powerful as the invention of the corporation. We're only half a decade into it. And seeing what will happen over the next 10, 20 years will be absolutely, absolutely incredible. And I'm so excited for that. And that is made so much better by the fact that all these tools are compatible by default, meaning that every single thing that's built helps every single DAO in existence.
Got it. Yeah. I'm really excited to be part of the journey too, and see all the growth there. As for the audience members who are interested in DAOs and maybe creating one, but have unsure about when you should create a DAO versus not a DAO. You mentioned DAOs are group chat with the ability to manage funds. So, would you say that is the main distinction for reason to create DAOs, when there are financial incentives or financial goals that are to be achieved, but it is not from a single organization, but rather than a community group approach to this financial goal?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important characteristics of DAOs is accountability. With DAOs, funds are not in the hands of one person, they're in the hands of the whole community, and the whole community can control them in a verifiable way and have a say over how those funds are spent. So DAOs as a whole are a lot more transparent and accountable than other structures. And that's something that I think is really important, because it means that communities can steward things together without having to worry about single points of failure. One person running off with the money, one person deciding to spend it all, one person making a bad decision. You don't have to worry about that in the DAO space. So I don't think that DAOs, for example, replace every type of corporation, because corporations are more efficient than DAOs. If you put decision-making power in the hands of a few people, things will get done faster. But with DAOs, what you get is this incredible structure for resiliency. where because decision-making power is with a community rather than a few people, you end up with a structure that ensures that there's no single point of failure. There's no vulnerability in the system that can come from one person's decisions. And as a result, I think that, for example, corporations can make decisions very quickly, but tend not to last very long as institutions. The number of corporations that change over in terms of like years or decade long timescales, there's a lot of changes in corporations because some merge, some go bankrupt, and very few corporations last a long time. I think that DAOs are very different in that many DAOs will actually, we're still very early, but many DAOs I think will last a long time because these DAOs are much more resilient structures than corporations themselves. Of course, since DAOs themselves have only existed in practice for a little over half a decade, we're a long way from being able to prove that. But it is something that I believe will happen.
Well, looking forward to it. Is there maybe one or two of your favorite DAO that you would love to see last a decade? Or is there a DAO that you're most bullish on right now, whether it be created with Syndicate or maybe outside of Syndicate tooling?
Yeah. So there's a there's a few DAOs that are really, really interesting to me. Some of which we've worked with at Syndicate, some of which are partners or investors, some of which are groups I really admire. I think that one DAO that's absolutely fascinating to look at is Uniswap. So Uniswap is a really interesting DAO because Uniswap as a protocol is a protocol that's it's like a decentralized version of Coinbase. It allows anyone to trade cryptocurrencies with low fees. And the really interesting thing about Uniswap is that Uniswap does not charge fees as a protocol. All of the fees go back to the people who are providing capital on top of Uniswap. The fees don't go to Uniswap token holders, but Uniswap token holders can vote on whether to turn fees on. And that's something that's very, very interesting because Uniswap itself manages to be completely free and available for everyone, but at the same time, it gives the community control over whether to turn on these fees or not and to accrue revenue. So you can manage in the Web3 world to provide things for free in a much more transformative way because the ability to charge is something that's still viewed as important, even if you're not charging money right now. So that's one DAO that's extremely interesting. Another DAO, one of the original pioneers in DAOs actually, is a DAO called Maker. So Maker is essentially a protocol that will essentially allow you to lend money against your cryptocurrency holdings. And when lending money, it will give you back a token that represents $1 of assets. So Maker offers what's known as a stablecoin called DAI, and that stablecoin is available for anyone to use. And Maker is fascinating because it does not have a single corporate entity or foundation. It used to, but it dissolved it. And what it did when it dissolved it was it replaced it with a bunch of independent groups working to make the Maker protocol better together. So there's no one company that runs Maker anymore. There's no one group that runs Maker anymore. It's a number of different groups who are all working together to make it happen. And then the protocol itself operates completely autonomously by offering this lending protocol that results in a stable $1 cryptocurrency. And that's something that's absolutely fascinating. They're one of the original DAOs. In terms of DAOs on top of Syndicate, one DAO I really like is Rug Radio. They're building a decentralized media network. And it was a group of NFT collectors who in the past hosted Clubhouse chats and Twitter spaces before NFTs became popular. And as NFTs became popular, they built up a really large community. And that community has helped educate a ton of people about NFTs, have helped onboard them onto NFTs. And they said, okay, we don't want this community to be revolving around us. We want this community to be owned by the entire community themselves. Not owned in terms of a profit making sense, but like the decisions should be made by the community and not by the creators of, for example, which shows to host, or for example, how to moderate the community and what educational materials they want to put together, which artists they might want to give grants to, things along those lines. And Rug Radio set up a structure where essentially they have a council of people who are elected by the community and making decisions. So they took a network that in the Web2 world would look like a highly centralized media network and instead gave that voting power and gave that decision-making power to the hands of the community. And that's something that's really remarkable. You'll start to see groups, I think, go in that direction more and more, where they could start centralized businesses if they wanted to, but instead they want their community members to have more of a voice, and they choose to go the decentralized route instead.
Oh, this is fascinating application of DAOs. I think really involving the community can be beneficial for many different types of businesses, initiatives, and I think these days we see things like loyalty points where you financially incentivize the community, but DAOs give such a creative way to maybe even spiritually or emotionally give the community more reward by empowering them and giving them ability to interact and contribute to the organization or product or the vision, etc. And yeah, it's really cool to see some of these initiatives going on. One interesting question popped up since you mentioned that in the last example where the community voted on the council members to make decisions. I was, and versus where MakerDAO and Uniswap, where the token holders use their token as a voting mechanism ecosystem. So I was wondering if you had a take on what the best way to come to a consensus is within a DAO. Do you have best practices that you provide at Syndicate, when people are building DAOs with Syndicate? Or do you think this is going to be a constantly evolving factor as DAOs develop in coming years?
Absolutely, yeah. One thing that's really interesting is that in the in traditional forms of governance, for example, you have direct democracy and you have republics as two common examples. You either vote on everything, and then that can result in, for example, in the US, for example, many referendums, many direct votes that are being voted on by people can often be, for example, phrased in a misleading way or misrepresent themselves and actually try to manipulate people into voting for a certain outcome. For example, I remember in one case, at one point, there was one state I was living in that was holding a referendum on the retirement age of judges. And it said, I don't remember the exact ages, but it said something like, should the retirement age of a judge be 75? And yes or no. And the way it's phrased makes it sound like you're instituting a retirement age of 75 that didn't exist before. What they don't tell you is that the current retirement age is actually 70, and you're actually raising the retirement age when instead you think you're adding a new one. And that's one example where direct democracy, in many cases, doesn't always can be manipulated by people with power. Republics, of course, you're electing someone to represent you, and a lot of people have various views, a wide collection of views, and some of those views might align with a political party and a representative, and some of those views might align with a different party and a different representative. But because you can only choose one, we tend to see a lot of polarization. In the Web3 world, a lot of groups are experimenting with what's known as liquid democracy and vote delegation models, which means that you can give your vote to someone else to make decisions on your behalf. You can give your vote to someone you trust or someone you respect or someone you view as an expert and let them make decisions for you with your voting power. But at any point in time, if you disagree with the decision or you feel very strongly about it, you can take your vote back and make your own vote directly, which is really, really interesting. I think a lot of DAOs are now moving towards this model. Most of them tried direct democracy for a while, and they found that it had its upsides of participation, but it had its downsides of it could be hard for like highly nuanced, highly technical topics, which require a lot of background reading. And the idea there is that you can delegate to experts if you want to, or you can always take your vote back and make your own decision if you want to. And that's something that's really uniquely enabled by blockchain networks because they're much more participatory. For example, giving every single individual person in the US the ability to vote directly on congressional legislation when they feel strongly would be a very difficult thing to implement in our current voting systems in the traditional governance world. But in the crypto world, it's just a few transactions on top of blockchain to take your vote back and to vote on an issue that you feel very strongly about. And that I think is something that's really unique. These governance experiments are something that's absolutely fascinating about DAOs. And I think a lot of lessons can be learned in politics and governments about how DAOs are experimenting with these different concepts.
Oh, that is fascinating. It sounds like honestly, we should implement that on a government scale. Delegating votes sounds like a great solution. And I remember I was redeeming my Ethereum name service tokens, and they were requiring the redeemers to either to make a decision on to delegate your tokens for someone else to vote with or not. It was quite fascinating, and I think it seems like people who are in the crypto industry are getting exposed to these new type of governance mechanisms just from participating in different protocols, and it's really cool to see these some of these major projects like ENS implement these type of DAO governance mechanisms, and yeah, very exciting. I think we have a 30 minute into the podcast, and wanted to, I think, pivot more to kind of wrapping up where, I think for the audience who want to participate in existing DAOs or create that their new, a new DAO, or just learn more about DAOs, do you have like a recommendation on where they can go to learn more or maybe get involved? Usually recommend going to the Syndicate website, reading through the docs there, and using the platform right away, or is there like a guidebook to DAOs that you recommend people to read up on?
Yeah. So it depends on how you want to get involved. There's lots of different ways to get involved. And one great starting point, just to get a sense of what's out there, is a tool called DeepDAO. It's at deepdao.io. And that essentially is a list of DAOs that exist, and you can see stats about them, you can see their participation, and that'll just give you a sense of the names to look for. And that could be a starting point for communities to get involved in. Then once you get a sense of a few groups that are out there and take a look at what they are, you could look at the DAO canon. It's by Andreessen Horowitz. They put together essentially a list of DAO concepts and reading material. So DAO canon, the DAO canon by Andreessen Horowitz. It's at future.a16z.com. That is a fantastic option for getting a sense of the theory of the space and the history of the space. And then after that, there's really no substitute to getting involved and trying it out for yourself. If you want to start an investment DAO and invest with your friends, of course, I'd highly recommend Syndicate at syndicate.io. If you want to get involved in a community DAO, using a list of DAOs on DeepDAO will be really helpful for you. One tip I'd also give to new DAO contributors, two tips actually. One is that DAOs are a structure where a lot of people, because there's a heavy focus on governance and voting, think you need to ask for permission for everything. But the best way to contribute to a DAO is just to see what they need and just get started. Some people will come into a DAO and build an analytics dashboard that helps the DAO understand its members better. Some people will maybe build a Discord bot for something they need. Some people will help moderate the community, write tutorials, write explanations of the DAO for beginners. Things like that are all extremely helpful, and you can just go in and start contributing. It's much better in a DAO to go in and show people what you've done to help, rather than asking for permission. You can ask for permission for big decisions involving spending of funds, but if it doesn't involve spending funds or modifying protocols, oftentimes just getting involved and spotting an area and helping out is the best way to do it. Second tip is that newer DAOs tend to be easier to contribute to than established DAOs. DAOs are still fast-moving, sometimes messy, sometimes chaotic organizations, and getting involved in DAOs is something where it's often easier to get involved with something new, where there's more ability to pick up context as you go, rather than something existing that might have many years of history. So look for DAOs that are newer. They probably need more help. There's probably more ways to contribute. And then there are some DAOs that focus very specifically on helping onboard new contributors. Index Co-op is one DAO that has a really best-in-class onboarding experience for new DAO contributors. Index Co-op provides essentially index funds on the blockchain, index funds of things like DeFi primitives, or index funds of the most popular cryptocurrencies, things along those lines. So look for DAOs that have welcoming onboarding processes. Index Co-op is one example. There's a number of other DAOs out there as well.
Got it. And last but not least, how would they, is there any way that they can get in contact with you or maybe follow you on social media? Feel free to drop your information in this podcast.
Yeah, happy to. So I am available at Will Papper on Twitter, WILLPAPPER. I'm pretty easy to find on Twitter. Definitely feel free to reach out there. Also, Syndicate has a Discord. I'd highly recommend joining the Discord and getting involved there. You can find the Discord link at syndicate.io. You'll be able to find the Discord link there and join the community. And then, of course, there's no better way to learn about DAOs than to try them out for yourself. So if you set up a syndicate and you need any help, feel free to ask questions on Discord or reach out to me at will@syndicate.io. I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hopping on, Will. It was extremely insightful conversation. I'll be reviewing and all the resources that you've mentioned. But it's great talking to you, and hope to have you on in a half a decade later when the DAO space is booming and everyone's using DAOs, and we can talk about some of the exciting projects then.
Thanks so much, Kinsa. Absolutely. It was fantastic to chat about DAOs. We are so early in this transformation that where things will be in the next 5 to 10 years will be absolutely incredible.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Will.